UK content. We want UK content for UK users. Content of quality and scale that serves the interests, experiences, and needs of all UK citizens. In particular, impartial news, comment, and analysis. I think in Canada, you too are concerned about local news and have introduced measures to sustain it. In the UK, we are considering IFNCs, independently financed news consortia, an attempt to use public money in partnership with private entities to sustain regional TV news which can no longer be sustained. This is really brave, and every time I hear the phrase IFNC, I hear that mournful tune, also from here I think, of Lady Franklin's lament. I dreamed a dream and I thought it true, concerning Franklin and his gallant crew. You all know how that ends. See what I mean about addicted to PSB. Fairness and access for all, universal availability, we want coupled with skills and digital literacy to enable near universal participation in the digital economy and a digital society. This is how do we get every UK citizen to be a digital participant. This is a truly laudable aim. We should be doing that. But it's amazing how much every UK citizen, or large numbers of them, have done it for themselves without that much help. This, of course, is known as the digital divide issue, the who has access to the on-ramp of the information superhighway, as we used to say way back in the early 90s. This is to recast information politics into early 20th century industrial politics. Shock horror. There is no such thing as the digital divide. There was no such thing as a refrigerator divide, or a TV set divide, or a telephone divide. All tech worth having gets adopted relatively quickly and gets cheap fast. Computers cost less than TV sets did back when we achieved 95% penetration of TV sets, and everyone will soon have an iPhone or an equivalent thereof. Digital divide is a phrase used by older politicians in the UK struggling to find their relevance to the debate, and digital divide is babble for that honest statement, how do we deal with poverty? Next issue from the bill is how do we reduce piracy? The bill introduces obligations on ISPs to send notifications to subscribers infringing copyright and to make this data available to rights holders on an anonymized basis. This would allow the rights holder to apply for a court order for the name and address of infringers and to take legal action. This is pretty controversial among the ISPs who don't want to be policemen. In addition, the regulator Ofcom is going to be asked to draw up a code for these offences, which could well include bandwidth capping for those who are committing them. Now, the bill also provides a flexible approach for online copyright issues. This allows the Minister to amend the UK Copyright Act for the purpose of preventing online copyright infringement. This is known in the UK as the Henry VIII Clause, as its pure power for the Minister to wield. It's like one of those fantastic magical swords the bad sorcerer has in a fantasy novel. If you could have a smite-tastic sword this good in World of Warcraft, you would pay anything for it. Some say the UK government has been over-lobbied by the legacy recording industries, particularly music. To quote one MP close to the process, "I have never dined so well as I have in the last few months working on this bill." It's easy to forget that copyright is a compact between society and creator, not just a law for the majors. I'm reluctant to say more about the bill as an election is looming and how much of it will survive, if any, is moot. We shall see. So as you leave the room, being a genteel and discerning Canadian audience, you will ask, what the hell was that all about? Well, institutional public service broadcasting has moved from living to hobby, and in the old adage, it's not wise to let your hobbies become your living. You can't have audience fragmentation without cultural fragmentation. Thus, the internet redefines identity, and identity issues are disruptive. Tish and piffle, you say, as the reality of where one's feet are placed trumps the realities of a screen. The trend is ever-rising levels of information, and every time bandwidth increases, so does our level of engagement. Print, movie, TV, video game, 3D we saw yesterday. Look back over 20 years of video game development, and you can see the trajectory very clearly. We're moving into an era where it's absolutely clear that the only difference between reality and a video game is merely the level of information. Regulation is a synonym for border, barrier, and boundary conditions. What is regulation if these are rebased? How do you avoid preservation regulation that props up the old and inhibits the new? Good regulation in this world would be bottom up, not top down. By that I mean internet regulation must be like Asimov's laws of robotics, 3 laws from which consequences and boundaries grow. Internet regulation must be recursive, fractal, coral-like, accumulating into protective reefs. A final thought. I admit to being unhampered by knowledge about Canada, but there seems to me a resilient sense of Canadian identity. I believe this strongly because when I was a 14-year-old walking the autumnal parks of London, my Canadian friend George used to hit me whenever I accidentally trod on a maple leaf. I believe that the countries and companies that do well are those with the right culture for the circumstances, because, or in spite of the cultural zephyrs from the US, France, and Britain, you have been inured in the who are we question from the beginning. And this may give you exactly the right cultural DNA for this era. We were raised in an era of institutional depth held together by vertical integration. Now we are in an era of fragmented breadth held together by search. But it's only tech, and there is nothing new in any of this. It's merely the form it takes. And one small change of perspective. For me, it's not the rate of change that's accelerating. Actually, the rate of change is a funny constant thing. It's actually the periods of stasis that are diminishing. It's the periods of stability that are in decline. I know it seems obvious, but it's a different way of looking at it. Every generation feels threatened by the newly invented bandwidth that it wasn't raised with. And every generation says to the generation with the new bandwidth, get your nose out of that book, that picture palace, that comic, that television, that video game. Yet somehow, we're all here and we all seem to manage. Thank you.